with us, particularly our keynotes and our panelists, which we're very much looking forward to. I am going to hand over to Salvador, who is a member of our executive, to chair this, because I think it's more appropriate than me taking up the space. So I'm going to step back and hand to Salvador, who will be chairing and is going to make some introductions and kick us off. Thanks very much, Sam.
Thank you, Robbie. So it's with a warm welcome to all my fellow compadres, whether you say g'day, qué tal, jingari, mari mari, kia ora, buenos dias, bom dia. Your presence here today is much greatly appreciated. I'm Salvador Cantellano Bustamante, and I will be your chair hoy día for this very significant event. I was born in Pudahuel, Santiago de Chile in 1983. And so this moment is very empowering for me to share the space with you all today. I work as the communications officer at AILASA while I'm pursuing a PhD, exploring climate change through the lens of documentary filmmaking practice and epistemologies of the South. I'm thrilled to join in what's going to be an emotional and enlightening celebration of our shared humanity, our adversity, and solidarity across los territorios of resistance, scholarship, and the arts. It's crucial to acknowledge that some of the stories shared today may trigger some deep-seated trauma. However, we are in a safe and diverse space. Among us are those who have endured the Chilean dictatorship and those of us who have survived abroad as exiles, refugees, migrants, and adapting to new cultures. Our formal proceeding begins with an acknowledgement of country, followed by a keynote address by Dr Sol Rojas-Lizana and insights from our esteemed panelists, Associate Professor Walescka Pino Ojeda, Dr Fabricio Tocco, and Dr Manuela Badilla. We encourage you all to participate in a Q&A session after the keynote and after the panelists, in what I hope will foster collaborations. I extend a warm welcome through an acknowledgement of country. I am speaking to you today from the unceded lands of saltwater peoples, the Kumbameri and the Gunjimbura, stewards of this region for millennia that we now call the Gold Coast and Tweed. I pay respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, as well as the Maori people of Aotearoa, New Zealand, wherever you join us from today. I also acknowledge the diversity of indigenous peoples from Chile and Bolivia, where the borders may have shifted, but the cultural continuity endures. I extend this heartfelt welcome to all those here gathered today, encompassing a continuum of indigeneities. From my ancestors to yours, bienvenidos, wherever you join us from, and respect to all living beings in the interconnected web of life. Today, we are here to commemorate the 50th anniversary of El Golpe of 1973, a violent coup visibly marked by the assassination of Salvador Allende, a democratically elected president, and the decades of enduring struggle that followed for the people of Chile. But we're also here to celebrate how far we have come and acknowledge the work that has been done and is still being done in the name of justice and remembrance. Para que nunca más en Chile, para que nunca más. Before I hand over to Sol, I will take the opportunity as the chair to set the scene for us, not in any conventional way, but in the only way that I know how, as an artist and a scholar in training. To my compañeras y my compañeros, I share these heartfelt words with you in poetry and prose, by drawing from my childhood memories, through a reflexive vignette becoming sentipensante. I began thinking about this opportunity by tapping into the affinities that I find with Sol's work, and her generosity that I personally experienced as a HDR student seeking guidance only a few years ago. I thank you, Sol, and I can honestly say that you helped me to find my path. While I was feeling lost, you introduced me to the scholarship of Enrique Dussel, Silvia Riviera Kosukanki, and the artwork of Cecilia Vicuña. These authors and artists have not only become influential in my PhD work, but also provide important stepping stones to understanding and informing the reflection that follows. Silvia Riviera Kusukanki has played a critical role in deepening my comprehension of the cultural continuum within my own indigeneity. Just as you, Sol, have illuminated for me that decoloniality is a lens that I can attach to my camera. Through these viewpoints, I believe that we are here today, in part, to pay homage to the enduring spirit of El Pueblo, a concept described by Enrique Dussel that means something more profound than merely the people. As a result of indigenous influence that permeates across Latin America, El Pueblo is something that I resonate with deeply through memory. As a cinematographer, I understand the mechanics of how photographs fade over time. But memories, they also fade, I have found, although the mechanics are much more complex. As I grow older, I only have a few memories from my childhood that remains vivid. I've worked hard to hold on to these particular memories of El Pueblo. I cherish these photographs. I cherish these memories, and I store them away in a safe place for this very occasion. You see, when I remember El Pueblo, it's not a place, it's not a settlement, but a sentiment that reflects the will of the people to overcome. I was born en un pueblo, and I grew up in la población de mi abuela, on the narrow, dusty streets of El Anillo, Pudahuel, a short walk from la Plaza de Victor Jara. There, at the age of 3 or 4, I encountered my first visions of an ontological invasion, the slow violence of a tank rumbling past, slow enough for the older boys and I to chase behind them, throwing stones, acting out the passion and struggles of El Pueblo. While the parents chased us in fear of repercussions, I imagined my abuela saying to me, "Salvi, venga," while the neighbors shouted over the top, "Quédate aquí, cabro weón." In the 80s, my parents were 2 young revolutionaries dedicated to implementing social change. They named me after Salvador Allende during a time when this simple act of love came at a great risk. My childhood was marked by being on the move from one pueblo to the next, one door to another. Santiago, Valparaíso, Viña del Mar, Concón, Talca, Limache, and back to Santiago again. This was our circuit of evading persecution, or at least that was my memory of it. When I reminisce, there's good memories, but there's also those memories of our children who disappeared, our parents who were tortured, our cousins who were beaten with batons until their skin was black and blue, my abuela holding my hand tightly as we walked past the policeman intimidating us with his machine gun. "Don't look at him," she said. I remember there were things we couldn't say out loud, even as a child. But then I do remember how we chanted out loud with anger and hope. From my living memories, Pueblo implies the will of the people protesting for justice and social change. One of the last memories I have of Chile is sitting on my father's shoulders, looking out over a sea of people, tens of thousands of people, singing in unison, "El pueblo, unido, jamás será vencido. El pueblo, unido, jamás será vencido." That's how I remember it. In English, we chant, "The people united will never be defeated." But there is no simple translation of Pueblo into English because these places have significant cultural meaning for indigenous and mestizo people across the Americas. By association, the word Pueblo is contestable because Pueblos are not just settlements, but sentiments and more. Cecilia Vicuña has showed me how through the arts, I can express my indigeneity, even as with someone with no Pueblo, with no tribe. It begins with fostering collaborations with people in communities, in relationalities with Mother Earth, for me here in Australia through South-South dialogues. At least for me, Los Pueblos are nostalgic continuums of my evolving identity where I'm able to engage in a paradigm shift through a nexus of colonial and indigenous histories and contemporary experiences, never arriving at a fixed point because identities, like all humans, are in a perpetual state of becoming. We are spaces of possibilities, proliferating the multiplicity of ontological worlds, bridging territorios of hope and struggle within a pluriverse. Personally, I talk about pueblos in Australia to engage in an act of ontological decoloniality, to reclaim my identity as an Australian, not as an Australian, not as a Chileno, but as someone with deadly Australian Latin indigeneity, as someone who is both an insider and outsider, local and immigrant, Chilean, Australian, indigenous, Latino, refugee, mestizo, citizen, borderless, belonging, becoming, a father and son with my heart beating in the rhythm of Pachamama, La Madre Tierra, Mother Earth, becoming sentipensante. These may seem like dualist perspectives through a Western tongue, but when framed through epistemologies of the South, through the trauma, memory, and place, these are tensions where physical ruins remain visible or hidden, embodied or built, perceived or imagined. Nevertheless, these become spaces with potential for social change, South-South dialogues fostering multiplicities of hope, scaffolding across the ephemeral borders of global and local experiences. You see, I have become the overlap. I am the crossroad. I am the brackish water, salty and sweet. There is no box for me in the Australian census, but there is a place for me in the scholarship of Sol Rojas-Lizana, where I can aspire to understand how to best acknowledge those who have suffered so that those horrors are not reproduced. So thank you, Sol, for showing me how powerful enduring memories can be. I remember my mother at the age of 20-something years old, playing a Spanish acoustic guitar, singing the lyrics of Violeta Parra, Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto. So without further ado, it's with great pleasure that I introduce Dr. Sol Rojas-Lizana to deliver her keynote address. Sol is a senior lecturer at the School of Languages and Cultures at the University of Queensland in Australia. Sol has over 40 publications, and I'm excited to learn that her graphic memoir, Historias Clandestinas, is currently being made into a film, and I can't wait to see that. I hope so. Sol, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Salvador. Those words were really moving, and I know they come from your heart. I'm going to share my screen now. Is that okay? So I hope now that you can see the screen and hear me well.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. So, well, good morning, good evening, good night, AILASA, colleagues, students, friends, family. I do hope you're all well. I would like also to start acknowledging the traditional custodians of country in which we meet, work, and live, the Jagera, Turba, and Cuandamuca people, in my case. We estamos on unceded land. And thank you, Robbie, and everyone in AILASA for inviting me to participate in this commemoration. Obviously, this is a date that is very important to many of us. So as introduced by Salvador, my name is Sol Rojas-Lizana. I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Languages and Cultures at UQ. This is in Brisbane, working, and my research is mainly related to everyday discourse studies, and specifically in the area of memory, trauma, discrimination, as well as decolonial thought. Regarding my locus of enunciation, I am a second-generation survivor of the violence of the civic-military dictatorship and the promoter of memory. I also want to declare myself to be a follower of Maestro Humberto Maturana. My research on trauma and memory starts from two assumptions. First, that memory is a right, as in a human right, which in the case of Chile was denied until the 90s and beyond. Second, that memory is a duty. In the first case, the right to memory is considered an individual right, and in the second, the duty to remember, a collective and institutional moral imperative. These two premises come to light and are expressed in memory works and have the objectives to strive for a better and healthier society where the principle of never again and the garantía de no repetición can be a reality. When I talk about memory works, I refer to the efforts made by people and organizations to rescue, save, or recover memory to avoid its privatization and containment. Memory works in Chile are a form of symbolic reparation. And in some cases, like in the case of memory sites, they are the results of the recommendations of truth commissions. I'm going to talk about memory works I have researched on the one hand, and that I have produced on the other, which are in both cases, of course, the result of the dictatorship experience in Chile. Regarding the memory works I have studied, I will focus on my research with projects developed by the Museum of Memory and Human Rights, an institution that has opened spaces for everyday memories to be known as part of history. So they promote this idea of memories with S as plural, not only memory. In the case of the memory works I have produced, I will talk about, in the second part, my co-author graphic novel, Historias Clandestinas, first published by Lom Ediciones in the year 2014. So my work in trauma memory for the specific case of the museum analyzes everyday discourses about the museum exhibits and also examines the content of 3 of their digital memory projects. In the case of the effect of the museum's exhibits, I studied years of comments left in the visitor books of both the museum in Santiago and also of its traveling exhibits to southern Chile, specifically to the cities of Valdivia and Puerto Montt. Visitor books are evidence of the impact and emotioning that the exhibit experience triggers in the audience, as well as indicating whether the museum's aims are achieved. These visitor books registered a variety of writers, from young people with either no memory of the recent past or with inherited or cultural memory of it, and also survivors, witnesses, and foreigners. The analysis shows that the visitor books are used to exercise the right to memory, sometimes cathartically, to confirm their duty to remember, manifested in transitional justice discourses such as the never again and no olvidar, and also to express emotions that seem to reflect a positive and healing effect on the writers. Moreover, the nature of the visitor's generational memory would evidence and trigger different reactions to the exhibit experience. For example, first and second generations manifest gratitude for having this physically large and spacious place of remembrance as a confirmation of a long-denied truth. Some first-generation visitors treat the museum or transform it into a place of pilgrimage to communicate with their loved ones who are among the disappeared, because, of course, there is no cemetery to go to. Third generation, with cultural memory, use the space to express a promise to build a better country, and those with inherited memories would express pride and even relief to find their relatives' names and images included in the exhibits. Now, for the case of the digital memory projects found in the platform Conectades con la Memoria, I work with sociologists from the museum analyzing thousands of comments left during the transmission of the digital experience called Sintoniza con la Memoria at the museum Facebook Live page in 2020. The experience was part of the museum's annual activities to commemorate September 11, playing radio broadcasts from that day in 1973 in real time. So this experience has also won some awards and has been running for some years now. But the 2021 is special because it was during the pandemic, and people couldn't go out to commemorate September 11. So the people connecting to the 2020 Conectados, Sintoniza con la Memoria were reached the million, almost 1 million people. So what is important about this experience is it's just a auditive experience. It's nothing else. There is no images there. So using discourse analysis, we examined the comments to understand the impact of the listening on the audience. And the results show that the audience uses a space to perform again their own right to memory in discourses narrating personal and inherited experiences of September 11. Because as you know, September 11 is what is called a flashbulb memory in social psychology, which is when you remember exactly where you were and what you were doing at the specific moment in history. So they use the space to talk about that, as well as many reflections on the image of Salvador Allende. And this is interesting because each year there seem to be more and more on Salvador Allende. And he's even sometimes addressed directly in the comments. So it's very emotional, that part. And also there are narrations about their everyday life during the dictatorship. Now, this experience allows memory to be exercised dynamically and in community, in what has been called a memoria viva experience. And this opposes the concept of museums as sites of history set in stone. Now, finally, my current research on the right covers the digital memory project called Epistolario de la Memoria, which aggregates letters addressed to victims of the civic military dictatorship. There are 2 epistolarios. The 2020 epistolario consisted of 34 letters from grandchildren to their disappeared or executed grandfathers. And let's remember that 94% of victims were male. I analyzed the letters to examine the grandchildren's aims, commonalities, and the way post-memory is manifested in their discourse. The results show that these grandchildren seem to have overcome the culture of fear that promotes silence and omissions as a form of protection, which is present in cases for the first and second generation. It is clear in their discourse that the victims are a constant and desired presence in everyday life. They are memorialized in sobremesas, through photographs and artifacts, as well as through embodied forms of memory, such as names passed to descendants and the observed inheritance of personality and physical traits. So family here is very, very important. In their letters, these grandchildren recreate inherited memories, of which the memory of the last time, that is, the last time the grandfather was seen alive, is recurrent. Of course, this memory marks the beginning of the family trauma. So there is always a before and after that memory. Grandchildren use the letters to promise their grandfathers to commit to memorialization and justice, that is, se hacen cargo de la memoria. To express regret for their absence, but downplaying it by emphasizing the pain of their parents and first generation. So they try to say to the grandfathers that they are fine. They also use the letters to celebrate their grandfather's political agency and ideas, which contrast with the discourse of previous generations and even truth commissions that did not include the victim's political agency in their accounts. This specific memory work brings awareness of the generational impact that the violation of human rights has on families and beyond. The second epistolario, in which I'm currently working, is comprised of 27 letters from female relatives across 3 generations to 19 disappeared or executed female victims. These letters emphasize even more than in the first epistolario, the militancy and agency of the women victims. So this is not common in previous memory discourses. So this is what is emerging now. And also they highlight that female victims were not only punished for opposing the regime, but also for being women who were not following their assigned gender roles. So I'm evocating here Rita Segato in her proposals. This is evident in the forms of sexual and gender violence they endured and that were not mentioned in reports on torture, such as in the Valech Commission, for instance, but which are certainly mentioned in the letters. In both epistolarios, I have worked with undergrad students translating the letters as part of the winter and summer research scholar program here at UQ as a way to involve them in this area of research. And I would, if they are connected now, I would like to thank you. You did a really good job. All the studies I have mentioned to you are proof of the importance of memory spaces in healing a society and restoring the dignity of its victims. This is more important today, given that the museum and other memory sites and memory works are under constant attack by the right wing in Chile due to the ascent of the necropolitical discursive frame of justification and negacionismo. It is a fact that at this moment there is an affective polarization, not just ideological, in Chilean society. Now I pass to the memory work I have co-created. Trauma studies have found that memory works emerge some years after the event itself. The book Historias Clandestinas is not the exception. Historias Clandestinas, Clandestine Stories, in the English version, is a graphic memoir. That is, it is autobiographical and historical. And my brother Ariel, who is a graphic artist, and I started this to create with this idea around 2010. So this is 20 years after the end of the dictatorship, and published in 2014. Since then, we have had an ebook edition, a second edition updated with new information, such as the confirmed assassination of Pablo Neruda, and an English version, which is different. It has more pages, we have more stuff there, and a movie in the making, as Salvador was mentioning. The idea emerged from my reading of the graphic novel Persepolis, and if Shirin is here, thank you very much for giving me that graphic novel, and the realization of two things. First, that the format of the graphic novel, because it is, as I say to my students, it is not a genre, it's a format, okay? The format was a very powerful way to communicate and connect to the history of different cultures due to the emotioning it creates. And second, so this is my second realization, was that my brother Ariel and I had a story of childhood that was, like Satrapi's, part of a major event in the history of a country. Following the style of graphic memoirs, Historias Clandestinas is in black and white, and the graphic art looks rough to imitate the ink effects in newsletters and pamphlets produced by mimeographs. And I noticed that I had to put a picture of a mimeograph there because many people don't know what it is. So there it is, that's a mimeograph. Historias Clandestinas is the true story of our family who sheltered some of the most wanted people in Chile for 10 years. Our house was a safe house and also a political cell of MIR, Movimiento de Izquierda Revolucionario, a left-wing political party that was a major target on the regime since they advocated for armed struggle. Its systematic elimination was very effective, as nearly 80% of MIR's leaders were killed, and their structure was almost totally dismantled. I was around 10 and my brother 14 when the Mir people, a couple, you see there in the slide, arrived to our house. This is about 3 years into the regime. Our parents didn't know who they were, but they were just trying to help people in need. And I am extremely proud of them for that. As we say in the book, they came for a week, but stayed for 10 years. A year after their arrival, our group became bigger, with 3 families living under the same roof. We also harbored another Mir leader, Andrés Pascal Allende, who was #1 in the wanted list, not just because he was a member of the Central Committee of Mir, but also because he was the nephew of President Allende and uncle of the actor Pedro Pascal, if you must know, but yes, he is. During 10 years, we lived in permanent peril. Thousands of Chileans were being kidnapped, killed, imprisoned, tortured, relocated to remote areas, or exiled. Apart from the strict safety measures we had to follow, because we were a safe house, our family did resistance work, since the adults and teenagers became militants of Mir. Some of the resistance work included producing and distributing the Mir newsletter, and as you see there, there is using a mimeograph, creating an anthem, spreading political messages, which in Spanish is called acciones de propaganda, doing sabotage works, driving people to clandestine meetings, and other things. Okay. In the meantime, life continued with its everyday developments, and people kept dying and disappearing around us. Our extended family, friends, neighbors, boyfriends, and girlfriends had no idea about our situation. Many of them learned years later, including my own partner, or only with the publication of the book. So the book was, at least to me, a coming out experience in many cases. The aimed audience of the book was a global reader who didn't know anything about Chile, so we made it simple, linear, and informative, adding explanations and footnotes when necessary. To help this process, I circulated several drafts among people from different cultures, backgrounds, and professions, and they are in the acknowledgements, and thank you again, because some of you are here, so thank you, thank you, thank you. And I guess this is also why it took us so long. It took us 4 years to finish this book. Too many drafts. Well, the book starts with the triumph of President Allende from the perspective of those who supported the Unidad Popular project. In the few pages of the prologue, we show the excitement people felt believing they were building a new society, and also included issues that brought the attention and active intervention of the US in the coup, such as the nationalization of copper and of telecommunications. Chapter 1 has very few words, as it is all about the coup, which did leave us wordless and in shock. We mentioned the frustration of our parents and finished that chapter when they agreed to hide the Mir couple in our house. The next chapter, chapter 2, is about how our family grew and worked as a Mir cell and safe house. That is how the resistance is done from within. While the next chapter, chapter 3, is about how the resistance grew outside in the streets, and of course, starting with the relatives of the disappeared and executed. The book finishes with the plebiscite of 1988 that marked the end of the dictatorship. It also includes the caveat that the end of the dictatorship was not the end of the disastrous economic model and harsh free market policies that it had established. At the time of its first edition, many books and graphic novels about the dictatorship were being published. So what makes Historias Clandestinas a bit different is, well, first, it is autobiographical, and that produced a distinct emotioning. It contains ethnographic and historical research. It shows the life of 2 generations and the dictatorship, Unlike El Eternauta by Oesterheld, it has a collective hero, and history itself is a driving force in the narrative. It includes stories of everyday life with humor and drama, because obviously not everything was horrible. And finally, it is designed to address a global reader, but also a national reader. So how we do that? To address Chilean people with direct or cultural memory of the period, we provided images and intertextual references that evoked identifiable historical moments and people. So as an example here for the prologue, we include these images, you see, the note symbolizing the nationalization of copper, and of course, the image of President Allende. Excitement and happiness felt in the rallies of support of the popular government, emblematic people, and as you know, tomorrow is another anniversary of the assassination of Victor. These images are from chapter 1, the coup. As you see on the right, we wanted to recreate a variation of the iconic photograph that is on the left, that is of prisoners outside La Moneda Palace while the tank threatened to run them over. All of them, of course, are among the disappeared. Repression is also present here in the form of the National Stadium. The iconic balcony where Allende used to greet people. And of course, the Count, the dictator. NN crosses are a symbol of the disappeared. So they bring the memory of Patio 29, a site at the General Cemetery in Santiago that started to be used to bury executed people right at the end of September in 1973. Performances by the relatives of the executed and disappeared. Of course, here La Cueca Sola is a very moving performance, and as it said there, es un acto sobrecogedor until today. People in the streets, and we also wanted here to emphasize the importance of social mobilization and rallying if you want to get anything. And finally, the triumph of no in the plebiscite. So to finish my talk, I want to do I would like to reflect on the significance of this specific memory work. And I have these 3 points to make. First, Historias Clandestinas gives visibility to the resistance work of everyday people. President Allende said, "La historia es nuestra y la hacen los pueblos." In this graphic novel, we see that this is certainly the case. Apart from the militants, there was a whole network of people in the resistance that contributed to the end of the dictatorship. They were called ayudistas. They helped to hide wanted people, contributed financially, collected information, and there is a big thank you here to the Vicaria, denounced, protested in the street, etc. Many people from this network didn't make it, so we, the survivors, have the duty to make this part of history known. Second, Historias Clandestinas shows how children, the second generation, are affected by and participate in historical events, offering unique perspectives about crucial moments in history that are often left outside of the historical record. And I'm actually quoting here from the back side of the English version of the graphic novel. Now, this point is further developed, really well developed in the movie that hopefully will be released by the end of this year. Lastly, Historias Clandestinas facilitates intergenerational dialogue. It has helped to establish a bridge to readers for readers who have declared that the novel, and I'm quoting here, starts in the parents' room and ends in the children's room. This is thanks to the format of the graphic novel combining images with words in a clear narrative that follows the classical crisis, struggle, and resolution formula. Historias clandestinas and other obstinate memory works are important for a society that at this time seems to be reluctant to have these conversations. In this presentation, I have shown you some memory works that have emerged to remember the trauma and consequences of the dictatorship and to promote certain conversations. That is, in the Maturanian sense, conversation, turn together or dance together. So some of these conversations, which I hope to promote, are, for instance, how we can develop a real culture of human rights as an antidote to relativism in values, so against the relativismo valórico, how we can contain the social production of violence, and here I'm kind of quoting Manuel Guerrero's latest book, and what can help us to reach individual and collective healing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sol.
Thank
Muchas
you.
gracias. I will now,
should I stop the sharing, or you want me to keep it?
Maybe even your opening page would be nice.
Okay.
But now we're going to have 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A, questions and discussions.
Let me just stop the sharing because I cannot see you guys. So if
yes.
Yeah.
No problem.
Thanks.
Yes, so over to you all. I think, yeah, this is a Q&A now. I felt like I, said a lot at the beginning, so I'm going to leave the space open to you all. Okay, if nobody has an immediate, Jalinda? Jalinda, do you have a question? Is that your hand up?
Glenda, ¿ya?
Glenda, disculpa.
No te preocupes. No es una pregunta, es más que todo un agradecimiento que Sol haya compartido algo tan especial y tan personal. Yo soy del Salvador, yo también viví una guerra y entonces me ha traído muchas memorias. Por supuesto, memorias de niñez, memorias de dolor, pero también Sol me ha dado las fuerzas de cómo continuar compartiendo esas memorias y esas voces que ha dicho que es muy importante, ¿no? Es muy importante mantener esas memorias y por mucho tiempo las he guardado para mí, pero creo que es tiempo de compartirlas y Sol me ha animado a eso. Así que muchas gracias.
Gracias a ti, Glenda.
If you want me to translate for everybody speaks Spanish in this space? No? All good.
It's
okay.
Fine. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Can I say something?
Yes, just go.
Yes. Hello. Hi, Sol.
Hi.
Thank you very much for this very moving talk and your research. Very emotional right now. Can you tell us a bit about this being made into a film? Can you give us a few details about that?
Yeah, sure. So there is this filmmaker from Spain who lives in Chile, and he read the graphic novel. and he immediately decided that he wanted to make a film, but he wanted to make an animated film, and it was his first time. So it's been taking a long time, and they did get some Fondesit money, some projects money for the pre-production and production, but I think they're a bit stuck now with the post-production of the film. And the film at the beginning had animators with their own style, but then he went to my brother because he wanted to really keep the type of drawings that you see in the graphic novel. So my brother is very much involved in the film. And the film is different in the sense that it's centered around him, my brother, as a teenager, living the experience of the dictatorship. And because if you read the graphic novel, he was the only one who had doubts at that time. He was, questioning why are we doing this? So there is a conflict there. And because he's also an artist, he wanted things more spiritual, and everything was so political all the time. So the film is the book, but it's more centered on his life, and it is animated, but also includes live action when it refers to the present. So it's the present, and when it refers to the past, it's in black and white, and it's animated just like the graphic novel. So yeah, we're waiting to see what happened at the end. But it has had very good reviews as a pre-project. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, and good luck with that.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
There is a question in the chat by
yes?
Selena. By Selena.
By Selena? Oh, yes.
Yeah. Hi,
Okay.
Selena. I'm glad you made it. Do you think that marching and demonstrating is still an effective form of resistance? I often worry that it lacks power these days. On the contrary, I think there is no other way. I mean, think about our union, NTU. If you don't go out, they won't give us anything. So in my personal opinion, I think it's completely, necessary. It's absolutely necessary to go out. Otherwise, we won't get anything. But it's my opinion, so I may be wrong.
I think marching is something that's innate in our humanity when we gather. Whether it has immediate action and we see that manifest into policy is one thing, but when we march and we come together, there's a certain humanity that evolves from that. So I think there's many like positives from gathering together, walking together, moving our feet together, chanting together. Thank you for that question, Selena. It's good. We'll go over to Monica.
Hello. I'm thinking that it is better for me speaking in Spanish. I am in Chile at the moment, and I'm studying my PhD in the Católica de Valparaíso. Pienso que siguiendo a Glenda pudiera explicarme mejor en español. Estoy un poco oxidada en mi inglés, entonces quisiera practicar más, pero en este momento necesito explicarme más ampliamente en español. Me siento muy inspirada por el trabajo de ustedes. En este momento mi trabajo es sobre una asociación gremial de mujeres campesinas, rurales e indígenas en Chile. Yo soy colombiana y vengo a estudiar, vengo a Viña del Mar a estudiar este tema. Y me encuentro con esta historia de Chile tan diferente a la mía. la colombiana. Colombia también hay una guerra muy, muy fuerte, histórica, que nos trasciende y nos configura de una manera muy, muy particular y realmente es de una manera muy diferente a la chilena. Y encuentro en esta organización que estoy analizando la experiencia de esta organización, una fuerza tan transformadora realmente de la realidad chilena en cuanto a la defensa de los derechos campesinos y de las mujeres, que me impacta y me hace pensar que pudiera contarla desde una perspectiva muy parecida a la que Sol utilizó. Estoy haciendo una narración ahora de la historia de estas mujeres a través de una ficción. Entonces estoy construyendo una mujer irreal, de fragmentos reales de estas mujeres que llevan una historia de 25 años. Y confieso que tengo miedo académico de la recepción de esto, cómo será en los oídos de ellas, cómo será en los oídos de la academia, y me inspira el trabajo, pero al tiempo me genera muchas preguntas con respecto a esto. Creo profundamente que el arte y la cultura y digamos, como romper esas barreras entre lo académico y tan sólido y a veces con esa raigambre, con esas raíces del positivismo, ¿no? Que tenemos que escribir en tercera persona, que tenemos que, o sea, que tiene que ser de una manera particular, se rompen y generan transformaciones profundas a través de este ejercicio, y por eso me arriesgo a hacer esta escritura así ahora. Pero yo quisiera saber, pues, cómo es para ustedes, o cómo ha sido para Sol en este caso, ya después de haber tenido la experiencia.
Yeah, I think thanks, Monica. Definitely, it's a good question, because it took us 4 years to finish this graphic novel. It's not just because of the as I mentioned, the draft, being circulated or anything. It's because when I went, to my head of school at the time, with this project, they said, well, you can do it, but outside of your research. This is not research on its own. So I worked on this graphic novel weekends. It wasn't part of my, and it's now, actually, it now is recognized as what they call non-traditional research output. But it's something that I didn't have the support definite of my school to dedicate time for this project. So yes, so you have to, if you're an academic, you have to do it on the weekends, definitely, and that's why it took us so many years. And the other thing, I think is a really good idea to resort to a graphic novel or something like that, because as I said, the format is definitely a bridge for many people. They will take it just because it is, it has images, and if they see a book, they may say, oh no, this is just too boring or something. So it's very good to communicate with certain generations and certain people who are not used to read a lot. So yes, I would say do it, go for it. Pablo?
Sí. Sol, gracias por la presentación. Brillante, encontré cómo se articula esto, la memoria del arte como artefacto de resistencia. Creo que es muy potente. Y maravilloso. Yo creo que planteas algo que dando vuelta respecto a este never again, este nunca más. Y ahí dejo una pregunta, ¿cierto? que es muy interesante, ¿verdad? Uno entiende este nunca más, este never again, respecto de estos actos de violencia, ¿cierto? De terrorismo de Estado. Pero también se ha planteado, o quedando vuelta por ahí, nunca más cuestione el modelo capitalista, nunca más un proyecto revolucionario socialista. ¿Qué piensas a ese respecto? ¿Cómo se puede tensionar este nunca más? Que diga, bueno, ¿por qué no pensar también otras formas de modelos, otras formas de más allá del capitalismo, ¿cierto? Para que ese never again diga, bueno, nunca más actos de violencia, pero pensemos también quizás otros modelos, ¿por qué no un modelo revolucionario? Entonces, nunca más piense la revolución desde una perspectiva crítica, lo estoy planteando. Eso.
Bueno, yo tengo mi propia postura, por supuesto, pero tampoco soy experta en este tipo de cosas, ¿no? Pero entiendo lo que estás diciendo, especialmente con el estallido social, donde se ve que no es solo, y es un poco lo que tratamos de hacer al final de la novela gráfica, ¿no? No es solo el fin de la dictadura, todavía nos quedamos con este modelo que es como una dictadura, el modelo ultra neoliberal. Entonces, claro, el estallido era esto, ¿no? Esta reacción contra este modelo que también viola los derechos humanos. Entonces, definitivamente, claro, ¿a qué nos referimos con el nunca más? Pero por supuesto, yo lo planteo dentro del marco de la justicia transicional, transitional justice, ¿no? Entonces, me estoy limitando a ese aspecto, ¿no? De la violencia de Estado en periodo de dictadura, pero por supuesto tenemos que tener, and we have to have these conversations of, you know, the damage of the system and how the system does, you know, there is violation of human rights still by the system itself. So this is definitely part of the conversation. And of course, other issues that, yeah, I don't think it's a moment here to talk about. But yes, yes, that's a reflection. What do we mean when we say nunca más?
Thank you, Sol. I invite us to consider, you know, this concept of nunca más, which, you know, is broad, you know, but can be applied to so many different areas of la dictadura and our continuing struggle to make change. I urge you to kind of think about that as well in the Q&A session after the three panelists that are coming. I'm going to throw to Peter Ross for our last question for Sol before we move on to our panelists, our esteemed panelists. Cool. Peter, welcome.
Sol, thank you very much for that. I assume we can get copies of the book easily by Googling?
Yes, you can do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I think the English version is in pre-sale. So you can buy it, but you don't get it until it's released. Probably, they say at the end of September. But the other one, you can just go to LOM Ediciones and get it. However, the shipping is very, very expensive. The book is not expensive, but the shipping is pretty expensive. And please don't get the ebook version. It's horrible. It doesn't, because you need to see the art on paper, really.
It's the format, right? Like,
yeah,
it should be experienced that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed that conversation.
Thank you
so much, Sol. Well, we're going to move on to our panelists, who each will give a 10-minute paper. We're going to begin with Fabricio, but we'll also hear from Manuela and Walescka. This will be followed by a 10-minute, 20-minute Q&A. So beginning with Dr. Fabricio Tocco, who is from the Australian National University. He's a lecturer at the College of Arts and Social Sciences. His area of expertise includes literature in Spanish and Portuguese, cultural studies, post-structuralism, and Latin American histories, only to name a few of his many areas. Thank you so much, Fabricio, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Salvador. Thank you so much, Robbie. Thank you so much, everyone here for being here on Friday morning. And thank you so much, AILASA, for having me. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share not slides, but the 3 papers I'm going to read so that you can follow better what I'm going to say. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the lands in which we gather. In my case, these are the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. I pay my respects to Indigenous elders, past, present, and emerging. I'd like to remember that sovereignty has never been ceded, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Since what gathers us today is the anniversary of a historical event, I thought it was worth talking a bit about time. Although sometimes it may seem so, time is never univocal. In Spanish, we use efemérides to convey in one word the English expression anniversary of historical events. Efemérides is etymologically linked to, but also an antonym of, ephemero, the ephemeral. Efemérides remember a prominent event that happened on a specific day in the past, an occurrence so significant that it was registered in a diary called ephemeris, to last through time. By contrast, ephemero is what doesn't survive the day, what is quickly forgotten. Much like 1973, the pair ephemeride ephemero is filled with opposing tensions: memory and forgetfulness, permanence and transience, past and present. I'm going to structure my talk with 3 ideas that may not seem immediately obvious to discuss 1973. And this is because I believe it can be productive to think about 1973 tangentially and transnationally, through other latitudes and periods of time. After all, the Chilean coup wasn't just Chilean, and it wasn't only a coup. Thus, I hope to shed some light on its significance. The 3 ideas revolve around time. The first one comes from philosophy, the second from literature, the third, the briefest one that will allow me to conclude, from astronomy. First idea is calendars against clocks. We habitually measure time with calendars and clocks, but we seldom stop to think that these are not quite the same forms of measurement. In thesis 15 on the concept of history and elsewhere, Walter Benjamin opposes the two. As Brazilian philosopher Michael Lowy puts it in his commentary on Benjamin, clock time is the purely mechanical, automatic, quantitative, ever self-identical time of the timepiece, a time reduced to space, which dominated industrial capitalist civilization ever since the 19th century, setting tyrannical, alienating rhythm of its factories. On the opposite side, there's calendar time, which represents the expression of historic, heterogeneous time freighted with memory. As Spanish philosopher Reyes Mates observes, calendar time does not only measure the time of humankind, years, and nature, seasons, night and day, it is also a powerful fuel to give meaning to life. For Benjamin, then, clock time is empty, contentless, oppressive, tied to the workday. Instead, calendar time brings back leisure, days of remembrance, as he calls them, holidays filled with content, encounters, and affect. To oppose calendars against clocks, Benjamin talks about 2 separate events that belong to the history of France, but that had global repercussions for Latin America and beyond. In the 1789 First Revolution and the 1830 Second Revolution. Both happened in July and are linked through their treatment of time. When the First French Republic was proclaimed in 1793, it instituted the year 1 of the new era, the Republican calendar, with new months and a 10-day week. It abolished Christian holidays. It meant to replace its Gregorian counterpart, establishing a truly universal understanding of time that would include atheists and Jewish citizens, which is one of the reasons why Benjamin, a Jewish thinker, was able to appreciate its potential. Paradoxically, this unprecedented calendar would recover something essentially religious that the relentless triumph of clocks had erased: the interruptions, the need to stop the machinery of capital, parar la pelota, as we say in Spanish, stopping the football and remembering the past together. Although the Republican calendar failed, lasting only for 12 years, Benjamin looks at the Second French Revolution because it seemed to promise a return of these defeated ideas about time. He mentions an act that took place over one of these 1830 nights, when revolutionaries spontaneously fired on several Parisian clock towers, which he reads as a literal and metaphorical attack to the relentless ticking of clock time. We could define this instance as a short-lived triumph of calendars over clocks, a moment in which the ephemeral met the anniversary, the July ephemeride. Lowy translates and reads Benjamin's ideas on the revolution's calendar as a historical shortcut, an interruption, which can only happen through revolutionary action. What do we make then of the Chilean coup? Regardless of the comings and goings of its calendar, 1789 still signified a watershed in global history. Perhaps this is what the Chilean coup has in common with it. 1973 is a historical shortcut of our times. It is in this sense that we should read David Harvey's claim that the coup triggered the first experiment with neoliberal state formation, a test that will be first enforced nationally, then regionally, to later be implemented throughout the globe, from Southern Cone dictatorships to developed economies and democratic administrations such as Thatcher's England, Reagan's US, even Hawke's Australia or Lange's New Zealand. Of course, 1973 was not a revolution, but a counter-revolution, a different kind of shortcut, if you will. It is in these terms that sociologist Tomás Molián from Chile defines the coup as a reaction against an ascendant popular movement whose impact survived the dictatorship itself, turning the country into a birdcage in which democratization could fly as high as the cage mesh would allow it. As John Beasley Murray puts it, following Molián and Virno's theory in counter-revolution, Pinochet's regime pushed forward the social changes that had been building before 1973, even before Allende, but reversed the political valency of those changes. To further understand the historical and global magnitude of the coup, then, it is worth asking what is the link between counter-revolution and time? What is the link between 1973, clocks, and something that calendars faces again and again with, the eternal return of the past? So the second idea is the past is not past. To answer attentively this question, what is the link between counter-revolution and time, we should go back to Edelvera de Velar's The Untimely Present, which examines the alliance that Southern Cone dictatorships established with neoliberalism and time. For Avelar, the free market, with its logic in which the past must be relegated to obsolescence, imposes forgetfulness not just because it needs to erase its barbaric origins, but also because it is proper to the market to live in a perpetual present. In short, 1973 initially aimed to signify the ultimate triumph of the perpetual present of clocks over calendars. However, as it happens with most revolutions and counter-revolutions that lead into dictatorships, Pinochet has introduced its own calendar, its own relationship with the past, creating sites of memory like the thoroughfare Avenida 11 de Septiembre, highlighting the very ephemerides we're today commemorating. Much like with the short-lived 1789 calendar, the triumph of the 1973 clocks we are today was ephemeral, because the past, like calendars, is unescapable, always lurking in what we call the present. In 1951, 11 years after Benjamin authored his thesis on history, William Faulkner wrote in his half-novel, half-play, Requiem for a Nun, that in southern United States, the past is never dead. It's not even past. Faulkner is here thinking mainly on the region's tangible traces of slavery, almost a century after it was formally abolished. Beasley Murray expands on Faulkner's idea to discuss Latin America's own history of slavery, bringing in the example of anthropologist Miguel Barnett's 1966 biography of Runaway Slave, based on Barnett's interview with Esteban Montejo, a former slave who lived well into 20th century Havana. As Borges, an unfortunate early apologist of the Chilean counter-revolution, wrote in one of his short stories, reality likes symmetries. Montejo happened to die in no other year than 1973. The short temporal distance between this year and our present is what leads Beasley Murray to conclude that slavery's legacies are still with us. Sometimes the past is not even fully past. And if we think about this sentence in Spanish, we can make visible its truthful, powerful meaning. On one hand, el pasado no ha pasado, the past hasn't finished occurring yet, but also el pasado no es pasado. Whatever happened in the past is not what it's supposed to be. There is a gap here between the participle past and what its infinitive to pass denotes, that is, moving in a path so as to approach and continue beyond something. In short, the past is not past because we're still enduring it, because it is very much a part of what we call the present, or because the threshold that divides the two is about a fragile mirage. In Chile, as in the rest of the Southern Cone, the past is literally not past. From human rights organizations such as the Agrupación de Familiares de Detenidos Desaparecidos, as Sol mentioned, and their constant demands for ending impunity and bringing torturers and murders to justice, to the NGOs Nos Buscamos, that reunites the children of the disappeared with their biological families from whom they were forcibly removed, including the scholarly and social discussions around memory and post-memory to elaborate intergenerational trauma. The legacies of the dictatorships are also still with us. And one of the most common cynical attacks that counter-revolutionaries and their inheritors have often made on the left has to do precisely with the idea that the past is not past, because it defies the core rhetoric about time. The so-called need to move on from the past is based not on calendars, but on clocks. Dictatorships have ended in South America decades ago, they say, so why should we still be stirring up the past? Based solely on chronological accumulation, forgetfulness effectively works as a renewed demand for a perpetual present that would somehow absolve crimes against humanity, even though these are imprescriptible, as there are no temporal limitations on the prosecution of perpetrators of genocide, as philosopher of law Luigi Correas reminds us. But is the past really past for counter-revolutionaries or their apologists? More than a ruin in the present, as Hablar suggests, isn't the past its active pillar? We need only think of Hernán Chacón Soto, one of the military brigadiers convicted of the murder of singer-songwriter Victor Jara. After the Supreme Court ratified his 25-year sentence, Chacón Soto killed himself less than 3 weeks ago for a crime he had perpetrated in September of 1973 as part of the coup. Why would an 80-year-old retired brigadier commit suicide if it wasn't because for him, too, the past was not past? Couldn't the 22 resistance to replace Pinochet's 1980 constitution also be read in this light? On the other side of the Andes, the past seems to be not past for apologists either, as we see repeatedly in the declarations of Vice President candidate Victoria Villarruel, who felt the need to justify the Argentine 1976 coup to attract voters for her running mate, far right-wing candidate Javier Milei, who has the best chance of becoming the country's next president. And all of this is happening now in Argentina, where the past is supposed to be at least a bit more past, as the country has put on trial perpetrators involved in genocide, much more so than Chile. From left to right, from Chile to Argentina, then, the past is not past, and we can also see this in most of the cultural production that has permeated the post-dictatorial scholar cone. In Chile, this is what recent political thrillers such as Woods Araña and Larraín's No, or even Patricio Guzmán's documentary Nostalgia a la Luz are about, which take us to our last concluding idea on time. The present doesn't exist. In astronomy, ephemeris had a slightly different meaning. An ephemeris is a book with tables that provide us with a trajectory of natural and artificial satellites in the sky, that is, their position over time. Nostalgia a la Luz takes us to a beautiful encounter between astronomy and history to show us the lingering impact of Pinochet's dictatorship. But what do astronomy and history have in common? Precisely the relationship with time. Astronomy may deal with the remote past, the origins of the universe, the solar system, but it can also shed some light on 1973. Guzmán goes to Atacama, a site known both for astronomy and history, to film mothers who are still looking for the remains of their disappeared children, clandestinely buried in the desert by Pinochet's dictatorship. Interspersed with these shots, Guzmán interviews Chilean astronomers. One, Gaspar Galás, reveals that the present doesn't exist. Because of the fractions of a second that light takes to travel and to be processed by us, because of the very trajectory of the celestial objects recorded in the ephemeris, events that we may perceive to be happening now are actually always happening in the past. From the 8 minutes it takes sunlight to reach the Earth, to the digital transmission of our images on a Zoom conversation. Saying that the present doesn't exist is another way of saying that the past is not past. Despite clocks and their ephemeral demand for forgetfulness, no matter how much counter-revolutionary neoliberal discourse insists on the centrality of the present, think about TikTok, the app, life always was and always will be happening in the past. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Fabricio. I might just start with a question. That was fascinating. I'm kind of curious as well about this link that you have between astronomy and history, and perhaps you might be able to tell us a little bit. Oh, my mistake. I'm sorry. As the chair, I've broken my own rule. We are going to the questions at the very end. I'm so sorry. Next, we are going to Walescka. Walescka Pino, Associate Professor Walescka Pino Ojeda from the University of Auckland. She is at the Faculty of Arts, European and Languages and Literature. Walescka's research is concerned with the ways in which art presents and contests hegemonic power. Her work traverses across literature, music, film, and activism. Walescka, the floor is yours. And my apologies.
Thank you, Salvador. You got a beautiful name, by the way.
Gracias.
Do I have access to share a little PowerPoint that I have? Okay,
yes,
so let me see. How do I do? Share. Here it is. Okay, it's a very simple, a small PowerPoint. So let me organize my screen here. Everybody can see it?
Yes.
Perfect, perfect. So let me see. I will do the little show here. Where is, oh my goodness, I don't see the show. Where is the icon to show it? Sorry. Play. Okay, there it is. Right. So, kia ora, greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand, the land of the long cloud. So I'm honored to be speaking from Aotearoa, Nueva Zealandia, New Zealand. Yes, my name is Walescka Pino Ojeda, and I am here actually representing my center, the New Zealand Center for Latin American Studies. My very brief presentation is entitled more or less Memory, Trauma, and Neoliberalism in Post-Dictatorial Chile, the Role of the Arts and Culture. I don't know, there it is. So I am going just to show this little slide and try to explain. The invitation that Robert sent to me was basically saying that I should talk about my research. And so I will try to engage in dialogue also with the research presented by my two former colleagues, which actually has been incredibly inspiring. Thank you so much. It's very, very gratifying and encouraging to be able to share what we are doing. So thank you so much for inviting me. I would like to start by saying that the presentation by Sol allowed me also to situate better my own work. And of course, the presentation by Fabricio. I think that after listening to Sol, I would like probably to state two things. And I am speaking here as a scholar, right? While Sol is actually in the intersection of art and critical analysis. So she has that position, and I am speaking as a scholar. I think that intersection where she's working from is an incredible gift, and it's incredible, basically, opportunity to really marry these two different critical and creative perspectives. The other aspect that I would like to highlight is that I think her work with resistance and focus on activism, really working on the ground floor there, on the ground, on grassroots, right? With all this experience with this refugee from the Mid is really a privilege in terms of having such a close tools to be able to build memories and recount artistically these memories from childhood, but also the intergenerational components. In my case, I talk about resistance, but when the cultural artistic works are already being produced, right? So from my academic perspective, I should be analyzing Sol's work, right? So that's the place where I am situated. So I talk about and I analyze resistance, cultural and artistic activism. Finally, I can see that my contribution to this field of analysis and is very much trying to provide some sort of theoretical concepts, theoretical tools, some sort of discursive instruments in order to be able to provide an account of what has taken place in our continent. I analyze usually, and I teach about Latin America. I am a Latin Americanist, but because of the complexity, the vastness of our continent, I have dedicated myself to Chile in the last 20 or so years. This is the book I published in 2011 with Editorial Cuarto Propio in Chile, which is called Night and Fog, Neoliberalism, Memory and Trauma in Post-Authoritarian Chile. This is a book that has served to provide my own, basically, theoretical, methodological platform for subsequent research that I've been conducting. So I can say I have listed here more or less the concepts that I have come about after all the reading of all the theories that relate to memory, trauma, neoliberalism, right? Which are the three pillars of my research. So memory and trauma lies very much intertwined, right? And memory as the psychological, the social, cultural activity and exercise that give us the identity of who we are, human beings, right? We are all situated, as Fabricio was saying, in time. We look at the clock, but we are actually in the calendar, right? So basically, we are historical, biological, psychological beings. And for us as human beings, etc., not just for human beings, because elephants, dolphins, everybody got memory, right? To be in the present is just to be, as you were saying, Fabricio, right? Following nostalgia for the light, right? To be in the present is very instantaneous because our present is always informed by the past and is built from the past. So from memory. And of course, the traumatic memory is the interruption of that communication and that fluidity, and that in the sense that trauma, this disruption, this injury, this break is going to compromise our abilities to situate ourselves in history, but also in our own history. In that way, it compromises our own sense of identity. And coming from the Chilean context of state repression and terrorism, imprisonment, torture, exile, etc., what we have is very much the process of reconstructing our identities in the context of that disruption of our historical, personal, social history. The concept of night and fog for me is a tribute to the theoretical concepts and the art that was produced in relation to the Holocaust, right? The night and fog coming from Nazism, right? Nacht und Nebel, the edict in Nazi Germany, right? The difference, however, in our continent, not just in Chile, is going to be that differently to the prisoners of the Nazi regimes who were put in concentration camps and those who survived were able in some ways to rebuild their lives. In our case, those survivors disappeared. They didn't survive, many of them, and they disappeared. So the fog for us has remained. It's not dissipated. And also I am using that in a little like a metaphorical sense, because if we think of the night as the dictatorial regime, what happened later is that we were immersed of the fog of neoliberalism. And here I come to my third fundamental theoretical concept. Neoliberalism, not just as the last stage on capitalist theory, but neoliberalism as the extreme form of fundamentalism, meaning by that neoliberalism is not just, again, a form of capitalism, but is like a bubble in which the neoliberal language is going to create a language of itself that is going to be self-explanatory, and that it means that it's going to operate very much in this compressed band that Hannah Arendt described for totalitarianism. And in that respect, neoliberalism is the most extreme form of ideological, economic, social form of fundamentalism, because beyond the language and in the context of this language, neoliberalism represents actually the complete almighty power of the market. We have always enjoyed markets. We have always traded among ourselves and with countries and across continents, but never the logic of the market was the regulating principle of our societies and our coexistence and our relationship with the environment, to the point that the planet itself becomes a commodified good, to the point of creating the catastrophe that we are now living. I am also been working a lot the concept of the periphery gone global, following David Harvey in some ways when he states that the experiment carried out in Chile was peripheral, but then was transported to the world, but also a little bit playing with the concept of Raúl Prebisch and the theory of dependency, when we talk about peripheral forms of capitalism. So these are absolutely concepts that I cherish, that are very useful for me to engage in cultural analysis. What cultural analysis I have engaged with? I've been mainly focused on popular culture and social movements, and literature that is not considered like a popular culture, but popular culture, I mean film, fictional, documentary, murals, and basically performances, right? The performances, which have become the most expedite and most, let's say, successful way for social movements, right? Moving away from just the banners, but creating art, resorting to culture, popular icons, etc., for manifesting the protest and the demands. I have also very much embraced the concept of the social psychologists in Chile, who in the 70s and 80s proposed the concept of the privatization of social pain, which go hand with the privatization of social state assets. That is to say that only those who have endured the suffering, the trauma, are the ones who remember and trying to deprive the remaining society, the rest of the society, of actually complying the need and the duty to remember what happened as a social event, as a political schisma, an earthquake that happened in our country, but also impacted elsewhere. The other concept that I have been using a lot in my analysis, especially for documentary film, is forensic memory. That is to say, these documentaries that are being really dealing with the remains of the disappeared, and how, in order to provide an account of their suffering, we have to resort to experts like forensic doctors, who are going to become the translators of these bodies that now speak through them. So forensic doctors and documentarians are going to be the mediators to transmit to us the memories that they themselves cannot transmit, as became abject victims of the terrorist state. Important when we resume and started to have all these social movements, especially in 1994 with the Mapuche nation. They were the first ones to actually start shaking the post-democratic era in Chile when they were protesting about the dams Ralco in southern Chile. They were the first one to raise the voice, and they were the first one to start to challenge the neoliberal state in Chile. They were followed very soon after by the students in 2004, the Penguin Revolution, who are going to present that, and then they will resume their agenda once they go to the university, and we have the 2019, the No More Profit social revolt and campaign that they put forward. To these forms of social movements and the way that they were presenting their political message, I have described that as insurgency of discourse and affective interventions, because they were speaking from their guts, from their feelings, from their rage, from their love, from their commitment. No political slogans, but rather this incredible new language that is going to be really renewing the way that political discourses from social movements are going to be developed in Chile. The other concept that I've been using a lot lately, and this is going to be present in the book that my colleague here present, Claudia Sandberg, published, right, in relation to cinema, social cinema in neoliberal times. How is it possible? Is it possible to have social cinema in neoliberal times with the new generations, those who were born after the dictatorship, or a little bit after the dictatorship, or before the return to democracy, and were shaped by the neoliberal society? How is going to be their political social discourse? In what way they are shaping a new way of talking about the past and showing a social commitment for transformation? So this is something that I have analyzed, particularly in the case of the cinema of Pablo Larraín, for instance, right? Because he's very unorthodox in many respects, resorting to Black comedy, Gothic now with the account that is coming, which obviously we are very looking forward to watch. So this is what I've been doing. Also in that regards, the dissident Homo economicus. I am about to finish. The dissident Homo economicus, because this is basically, if we are, this generation have grew up within the economic rationale of neoliberalism and all the implications of that, meaning that in what way you are going to be getting aside from that rationale and become dissident to the platform that already exists. And of course, the last concept that I've been developing in relation to popular music in Chile is how music is resisting the neoliberal totality. And I am playing here with the concept of totalitarianism, which I can explain in the when we get to the questions. And I need to get out of my my PowerPoint here. I think I already completed my 10 minutes, Salvador. Sorry, I cannot see you. Yes?
1 o 2 minutos.
Well, I think that I can round up just by saying that I believe that when you read my profile, my academic profile, I am absolutely committed within the academic world to the role of the arts and to the role of culture. I truly, truly believe that for those of us who have not had the opportunity to live firsthand political, social activism, the activism that is basically pursued in the arts is what actually has been enabling for the broader society to come to terms and familiarize with the political social processes. For instance, when talking about even the film Machuca, the impact of that film in the Chilean society can only be compared to the impact of the official history in Argentina, right? The impact of cinema and how when you do not belong to social familiar context in which you can have certain proximity to the historical events, how do you reach that? How do you get to know that when you are very much aside of that? I think that the role of art and culture, like education, right, is a long-term work, and it is there and it prevails because you can revisit it and you can reanalyze it and you can always learn something new. And in that regard, I also really cherish the role we have as teachers, academics, and researchers, and becoming responsible of providing an account of all this work. That would be my presentation. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Walescka, for such a passionate, sharing of your knowledge. I can't wait to get into the Q&A for that. Next, we're going to Dr. Manuela Badilla, who works at the School of Psychology at the Catholic University of Chile. Manuela holds a PhD in sociology, and her work is through the intersection of cultural and political sociology, exploring conflict, collective memory, and public spaces in post-dictatorial Chile. She holds also a postdoctoral research fellow or has at the University of Valparaiso, focusing on the connections between social mobilization and new generations in Chile. Manuela, over to you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Salvador, for such a beautiful presentation of this panel. And also thank you, Robbie, for inviting me. It has been a pleasure actually to listen to my colleagues. I was not familiar with the work of Sol and Walescka and Fabricio, so it's fantastic to have this conversation, and being also here in Chile, I feel like closer to you guys. And I have to say that we don't have, it's very, I feel very bad because we don't have this tradition that you have over there of acknowledge, the original people, the owner of the land. So I will take advantage of that. And also I would like to acknowledge the owner of this land, the Mapuche people. I'm living right now in Santiago, but 5 centuries ago, there were also indigenous people here. So I'm going to share the presentation, and I will try to be very brief. Are you able to see it?
Yes, it's working.
Yes, yes, we can see.
Okay, great. And I will try to be very brief. So what I would like to share with you today are some of my last reflections about the Chilean counter-monument wave, which is a phenomenon that has raised powerful questions for Chilean political community and has revealed the strong conflicts of collective memory that Chile is facing today. I think this is even, at least for me, is even more important after we have commemorated this 50 years anniversary of the coup, which has been very, very difficult here in Chile. Sorry. So you all are familiar with this, but I would like to stress here that Chile experienced a radical transformation of the economic system, turning this country into one of the most neoliberal societies in the world, as actually Walescka was explaining very well. And Pinochet also imposed a constitution that Chileans are still trying to change in a very complex way, but we are still working on that. So we have this particular frame, and you all have actually talked about that, which is the idea of trauma, to understand our relationship with the past, right? So we understand as a society that after a difficult and violent political period, societies face a process of coming to terms with the past, a social process that, especially after the Second World War and in the aftermath of the Holocaust, many authors have paralleled to the physical or psychological healing process after traumatic situations. The idea has become a transnational discourse, and trauma actually has permeated social discourse and become a cultural category to understand our past. But today, I would like to mention a kind of movement in this way that Chileans have had to understand and to relate with our past. So in October 18, 2019, we had the beginning of this largest wave of mobilizations in Chile since the end of the dictatorship. During this period, 31 people were killed in different circumstances. Some of them were killed by the police, and more than 300 people suffered eye injuries. Also, 3,000 people were victims of police abuse in 5 months of protest. So people from different generations, classes, and territories clamor for an array of sociopolitical and economic transformations. The demands were linked to policies inherited from the dictatorship, but also from other historically silenced forms of oppression. So the protest gave rise to what I've called as a mnemonic movement, a mobilization of Chilean meanings and representations of the past. These mobilizations activated a very complex process that we have seen connected to the constituent moment that Chile has opened, which has been a time to think about Chileans about how Chileans see themselves and what type of rules, codes, and emblems Chileans want to follow. The process has had many chapters, and we can talk about later because it's very complicated. But which is clear is that the process that can be referred as a refundational moment is still open. Chileans are in the aftermath of the uprising. This process and its particular temporality have a parallel side, which in my project is the Chilean counter-monument wave. So if you are not familiar with that, the social uprising released the questioning, intervention, creation, and in some cases, the destruction of Chile's public monuments. Since October 2019, more than 400 public monuments through the entire country suffer alterations. That means more than 64% of the monuments. These were affected by different types of alterations, from the destruction and of removal of the monument, the dismemberment, the burning, to the sticking of stickers or graffitis on the monuments. Those were monuments built in different historical periods with the purpose of preserving the hegemonic memory of the national state. They represent colonial and national heroes, men of the elite of the military world, which is very important for this commemoration, of the politics, and some of them of the cultural world. This social phenomenon is not new in Chile or the world, but in this case has been expressed in a magnitude and extension never seen before in this country, which unveil a demand for the construction of counter-hegemonic memories in Chile. These reflections are inspired by debates of cultural and political sociology and memory studies. And I have like 3 bodies of literature, or 3 main debates that I'm engaging with. On one side, I'm assuming the conflicted dimension of memory, a dimension that intensified and accelerated in times of social change and mobilization. And I am in conversation with the expanding field of memory and activism. But also I'm inspired with the literature that emphasizes the role of space as a material anchor of this social phenomenon. And finally, and maybe most important for this reflection, I am inspired by the field of sociology of time that argue that time can be understood not only in linear terms, but most importantly in terms of how we experience it. In this sense, I'm in conversation with recent works on temporal structures and mnemonic regimes as a necessary forms to understand the effects of modernity. Here, I stress the relevance of understanding forms of challenging those temporal regimes. And I see this counter-monument movement as at least one way to challenge that mnemonic regimes that we have faced. So only so you can have an idea of the project, this is an ongoing project still, a 3-year qualitative research project that include interviews with demonstrators and also with experts, and archival work, including official documents, press reports, and social networks. So I've been talking with these people in the city of Valparaiso, Temuco, and Punta Arenas, and also I have a small case in Santiago. And just to finish, right? So this wave of counter monuments came, or has came, at least until now, to challenge Chilean mnemonic regimes about the nation through an entangle of different temporalities. So we have seen in the public sphere different times coming all together. So on one hand, we have the dictatorial past, meaning the crimes perpetrated by the dictatorship and the resistance to those crimes. In that sense, also the Unidad Popular came to the streets during that time of the social uprising. We have the patriarchal past, meaning recent and long-standing violence against women and the struggles of feminist movements to face that violence. But also we have the national past and the colonial past, meaning national land occupation and violence against indigenous people, the military culture that allowed this process, and the ideals of progress and industrialization. When it comes to the colonial past, we have colonial land occupations and violence against indigenous people, and also the indigenous struggles now and then. So we witnessed the encounter of all these different temporalities in the public sphere during the uprising. And I would like to, because we have very little time ahead, so I would like to close this reflection with the conclusions, right? So what happened with this now? What does the aftermath of this counter-monument wave means today that Chile still experiences a refundational time? The counter-monumental wave can be interpreted as an epistemological tool that highlights the hegemonic knowledge, the mnemonic regimes, and also the possibilities to challenge them. It means also a pause in colonial and national silences. The aftermath of the counter-monumental wave has activated debates about memory that were not present in Chile and that have been key in the constituent discussion that has taken place lately. For example, through the reappearance of the conversation about national heroes and debates that we have experienced these last days about the figure of Allende. This illustrates the fragility of the counter-hegemonic processes and the eruption of new conservative wave of homogeneous national narratives and symbols that on the 50 years commemoration of the coup have been more present than ever. And with that, I would like to thank you all, and I will finish here because we only have 10 minutes, so thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Manuela. I mean, it's so wonderful to see the threads between all three papers, including Sol's work, in that the contemporary work, this work now, is still important, you know, like it's still necessary. And it shows us how our reimaginings of the way that we consider the past, or that the way we use art, or the way that we use scholarship is still necessary more than ever. So thank you, muchas gracias to all our panelists and Sol for the keynote. I now throw it over to you, to the members, for a Q&A. You can either raise your hand, or Walescka, did I see you almost raising your hand?
It was just accidental, but since you are I was just organizing myself here, but I just wanted to say to Manuela that I absolutely love the conclusion of your presentation, because the concept of refoundation has been used so much in Chile in the last 40 years or so, right? The capitalist refoundation, but now you're talking about a different refoundation that relates basically to the counter-monument wave. And you say that there is this epistemological refoundation that even goes back to colonial times, because I have perceived so much pessimism around, right? Especially after the defeat of the constitution, the elections last year, right? The plebiscite. That like we are stuck, that there is nothing to be done, that the people is basically, but what you're saying is something different, if I understood correctly. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. Okay. I don't know, my conclusion, I think, is also a little bit pessimistic. But yeah, I'm thinking on that direction.
Did something happen?
No.
No. Okay, cool. No, sorry. I think it just might have cut out on my side there for a minute. Thank you for the question, Sol. We'll go to you now.
Just to thank, well, everybody, but Manuela, I really liked your paper. And I noticed also that you work with COES. So, and it's interesting because I became aware of COES by listening to Proyecto 50. I don't know if you know about it, but that podcast that it was extremely well made, and, you know, provoked this incredible reflection of people talking. So just if possible, you know, to tell us a bit what these institutes are doing, because they are not the university itself, they are something. My idea is it is something else. And the other thing is, I don't see in the work on memory and trauma coming from the people working in Chile, much connection with the decolonial thought. So just let me know if I'm wrong.
No, you are totally right, and thank you so much, Sol, for that question and comment. Because it's actually one of the ideas that I've been working with, you know, the connection, like reflecting on the ubiquity of trauma to understand our past has some issues in my own view, you know. And one of those issues is that we have not been looking behind, you know. And what I saw during the social uprising is that frame to work with the past, to elaborate also for recent past and traumatic past, was literally shaken by protesters, right? That came to the streets and engaged in like solidarity practices, crossing, you know, temporal borders. So it was not only about trauma in that sense, but it was much more about resistance, about moving, about, you know, sharing, about empathy. And I think that is something that this decolonial approach kind of is offering to that perspective that has been so hegemonic to understand our difficult past. And about COES is a very interdisciplinary center, and we are 4 different universities. Es la Universidad de Chile, la Universidad Católica, la Universidad Diego Portales, and there are some scholars from the Universidad Adolfo Ibáñez. And it's a very engaging space, you know, to think with other colleagues. So we are working, we have small projects there. So right now, for example, I have a small project on conservative memories that has been also an issue that has emerged with really powerfully these last 2 years, I will say. So we are studying, for example, it has been very difficult, but memories about, you know, Pinochet, and also about national heroes, military heroes that are very present right now, you know, in the public debate that the Constituent Assembly is carrying out. So it's very, for us, and I think I'm reading you, people here, it's kind of scary. It's very problematic, it's difficult. We are facing, I would say, a very dark moment in that sense. That's my feeling after this commemoration. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Sol. Thank you, Manuela. So we don't have very long left until 12 o'clock. So I think I would just like to ask Fabricio one question. And I guess this goes to the heart of something as well that Walescka spoke about, and that is through the reimagining of things, right? For me, it's the reimagining of documentary, so thank you for that. But there's the reimagining of time and the reimagining of calendars. I really love the connection that you made between astronomy and history. So I'm wondering if you can maybe trace a little bit for us on how you came to make these connections between astronomy and history.
Well, I'd love the connection to be mine, but I actually have to say that it's Patricio Guzman's connection. It's something that he goes on in the documentary. He was interested in astronomy as a kid because Atacama became sort of a hub for astronomy due to the privileged area to look at the sky. But it, of course, also became a site of disappearance, of clandestine burials during the dictatorship. And one of the points that the documentary makes is that everyone was okay with Atacama becoming this hub of astronomy, and no one even occurred to them to question why are they obsessing with the origins of the universe, origins of the solar system, such a remote past. But everyone had problems looking at the recent past. So in that conundrum, I would say that paradox, I think that there's a very interesting question, very interesting link there between history and astronomy. And the connection perhaps that I made with the past is not past, this idea that I think everyone talked about. it was the first thing that came to my mind when I was watching the documentary and hearing and listening to Gaspar Galás' idea that the president doesn't exist. He, of course, was talking about this idea from a scientific astronomical perspective, but the link is kind of very obvious to establish there, right?
Thank you. Thank you, Fabricio. I'm sure we could keep talking. Look, in the 2 minutes that I have left, I do want to announce that we have updated the AILASA website, and I would like to share that with you now just for a few brief moments. And then if people want to continue and stay in the space, I'm happy to hang around and continue to facilitate this conversation for 15, 20 minutes or so. So if you don't need to rush, please don't. Let's continue this collaboration through dialogue. But I do want to do a soft launch of the new AILASA website that we've worked very hard on, and we've collaborated with an artist from Bolivia, Notke Leaf, and we've been working and contemplating how this would look for several months. So I welcome you to go and have a look, and especially if you go to the site artwork page at the end, you can find a conversation with Notke Leaf, where we begin to find out a little bit more about the depths that she carries philosophy and through process into her work. So you can start to see now that we've created, a gallery for this space. So I think this marks, a really exciting chapter for AILASA as a group into that intersection of art and scholarship. So with that shared now, I will stop sharing my screen and just give it back to the floor if anybody would like to ask any more questions to our panelists. To Sol, thank you very much. Thank you so much for sharing, your wisdom, your time, your scholarship. If you have to leave, we understand as well. Especially Manuela, for you, it's probably like midnight over there now. 12 de la noche, de la mañana. But yes, so I will stay just to make sure, we don't all have to leave. But back over to the floor or to our panelists if you want to give any closing comments, or even to Robbie as our AILASA president.
I'm the one person that no one wants to hear from, so I will leave it to the floor and to the panelists to continue the discussion. It's been a wonderful paper. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm deeply grateful.
I just would like to say before I leave, because actually it's very late here, so I'm a bit slow, and I'm sorry about that, but muchas gracias por este espacio. Realmente un espacio muy cálido, y es fascinante poder conversar del trabajo que uno hace en un espacio cuidadoso, caring space, and a very nice people. So thank you so much.
Gracias, Manuela.
Un abrazo.
Abrazos grandes.
Gracias, chicos, Salvador, Robbie.
And la próxima, next week, there is Pablo Aranda there down. I think he's presenting on our seminar series on Friday next week on, hola Pablo, on water issues in northern Chile, something like that. Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Muy importante.
Are the seminars online?
Yes. Yes, they're online. I think, Pablo, you're presenting in Spanish, though, aren't you?
Yes, the idea we discussed that. I'm going to present in Spanish.
Yeah.
That is focusing main Petorca, that is several problems with water, and the rethinking about the water governance. This is my project. I work in that in my PhD.
Excellent.
Muy interesante.
Thank you, everyone.
Can
Thank
I
you,
also
Manuela.
say, sorry.
Un gusto.
Su gusto.